Welcome to Neural Nexus Podcast, where we explore the hottest topics shaping the world. Let's dive in.
Okay, so you wanted to know more about Martin Luther King Jr. And, going beyond the I have a dream speech.
All right.
And you found this really detailed Wikipedia entry. It's amazing. There's just like so much information in here.
Yeah.
So we're going to go on a deep dive today to really understand him as a complex human being, Explore those lesser-known campaigns, his theological evolution, even some of the controversies.
Yeah, it's so easy to think of these figures like King as almost mythical, but they're real people with real struggles. And I think, seeing those complexities really helps us understand their impact in a much, much deeper way.
Exactly. So let's jump right in with his early life. We know he was born Michael King Jr. in Atlanta back in 1929.
Right.
But what's interesting is that his name changed to Martin Luther King Jr. when he was just 5 years old.
Wow.
And apparently his dad was so inspired by a trip to Germany that he changed both of their names.
And that name change right there, I mean, that's a clue to King Jr.'s future path.
Right.
King Sr. was so deeply affected by the legacy of Martin Luther, right? The guy who basically kickstarted the Protestant Reformation by challenging the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
So from a young age, King Jr. was connected to this idea of fighting for what you believe in, even when it means going against the grain.
Wow. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
It's like that name change foreshadowed his whole life.
It's like, yeah.
And speaking of his life, the entry talks about how he experienced racism firsthand as a kid.
Yeah, just imagine that, right? A child seeing the blatant unfairness of segregation. It's no wonder, right, that experience shaped his commitment to justice.
Absolutely. The entry also mentions that he skipped 9th grade.
Whoa.
And went straight to Morehouse College at 15.
Wow.
That's incredible.
It really shows his intellectual drive,
Yeah.
Plus, Morehouse was a historically black college.
Right.
And both his dad and his granddad went there, too. So it makes you think about, how important that legacy and that community were in shaping his development.
Yeah, I hadn't considered that before.
Yeah.
It seems like every detail adds another layer to understanding him.
Totally.
Then there's this detail about his first trip north when he was 18.
Okay.
He spent the summer working on a tobacco farm in Connecticut, and it was like a totally different world for him.
Yeah, think about the impact of that, right? Seeing an integrated society for the first time after living in the segregated South, it must have been eye-opening.
Totally.
Wait, things don't have to be this way.
Yeah.
And that experience probably just fueled his belief that change was possible.
He even wrote to his dad about being amazed that black and white people could go to church together.
Wow, that's incredible.
So, okay, now let's move on to something a bit more complex. His theological journey.
Yeah.
He started doubting the Bible as a teenager, even questioning things like the resurrection of Jesus.
It's fascinating, because he wasn't just blindly accepting what he was taught.
Right.
King was wrestling with his faith, really trying to figure out what he truly believed.
Yeah. And
this intellectual honesty is something you see throughout his life and work.
Right. Then during seminary, he embraced the social gospel. That's the idea that the church should actively address social problems.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For King, this wasn't just about, individual salvation. It was about using your faith to fight for social justice.
Yeah.
And it became the foundation for his belief that fighting for civil rights was a moral imperative.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
But then there's this whole debate about plagiarism in his doctoral dissertation at Boston University.
Right.
Yeah.
So the Wikipedia entry, it acknowledges that the plagiarism was confirmed by an academic inquiry, but it also says that his dissertation still makes a valuable contribution to scholarship. So, it raises a complicated question.
Yeah.
How do we judge historical figures, right? King's actions were wrong, but can we separate the man from his work?
Right.
These are the kinds of questions that that historians continue to debate.
It's a reminder that even our heroes have flaws.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered his early life and his theological development, which was a lot more complicated than than I realized.
Yeah.
Now I'm ready to dive into the heart of it,
Okay.
his campaigns.
Go ahead.
And as we said earlier, there's, so much more to his activism than just the March on Washington.
Absolutely. King was a tireless fighter for justice.
Yeah.
He led so many campaigns tackling different aspects of racial inequality
Right.
across the country. His strategic thinking and his relentless dedication are really remarkable.
Let's start with the Albany movement in 1961.
Okay.
This was his attempt to desegregate Albany, Georgia, right?
That's right.
But according to the entry, it met with fierce resistance
Yeah.
and didn't achieve its goals.
It's a prime example, I think, of how difficult nonviolent resistance can be.
Right. Yeah.
Even with thousands of people involved, they faced incredibly strong pushback. And it shows just how deeply ingrained segregation was and how much work was needed to dismantle it.
There's the Birmingham campaign in 1963.
Okay.
Which, according to the Wikipedia entry, strategically used children in protests.
Yeah, this was a controversial tactic, no doubt.
Yeah.
But it was a turning point in the movement.
Right.
Those images of children being attacked by police dogs.
Oh, yeah.
And blasted with fire hoses. I mean, they shocked the nation.
Yeah.
And finally forced people to confront the brutality of segregation.
Right.
It's a stark reminder of the sacrifices made by those on the front lines of the fight for equality.
Yeah.
And how those sacrifices forced a change in public opinion.
That campaign also gave us one of King's most powerful quotes.
Oh, yeah.
I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate.
Whoa, that quote really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it?
No.
He's basically saying that complacency is more dangerous than outright hate.
Right.
It's a challenge to look inward and ask ourselves,
Yeah.
are we doing enough to fight injustice, or are we part of the problem?
It's so easy to get complacent, especially if
Yeah.
you aren't directly affected by an issue.
Right.
Okay, so after Birmingham, King shifted his focus to the Chicago open housing movement in 1966.
Okay.
What was the goal of this campaign?
Well, the goal was to expose and combat housing discrimination.
Okay.
Which was, it was rampant even in the North.
Oh,
And what's interesting is that this campaign faced a lot of resistance,
Hmm.
showing that the fight for equality wasn't limited to the South. It really shattered the myth of Northern racial tolerance.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I never knew about that campaign or that it was so controversial.
Yeah.
So what happened next?
The Chicago campaign, it also kind of marked a shift in King's thinking.
Okay.
He began to focus more on the connection between racial and economic justice.
Okay.
Like it wasn't enough to just dismantle legal segregation.
Oh.
He saw that true equality required addressing economic inequality as well.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
It shows how King was constantly evolving, broadening his understanding of the problem.
Exactly. And it leads us to one of his final
Right.
and most ambitious initiatives, the Poor People's Campaign.
This campaign aimed to address economic inequality across all racial lines,
Right.
bringing poor people together, regardless of their background,
Yeah.
to fight for economic justice.
You got it. It was a bold vision,
Yeah.
attempting to unite this diverse coalition of people around
Right.
a common cause.
Mm-hmm.
It's even more striking considering that this was happening back in the late 60s,
And the Wikipedia entry mentions he was planning this huge march on Washington to demand economic justice.
Right.
But it says that even some of his allies saw this as too radical.
I can see why, this wasn't just about voting rights or desegregation anymore.
Right.
This was about challenging the entire economic system.
Yeah.
It showed how King's understanding of injustice had grown.
Yeah.
And how he was willing to push even further for change.
It's tragic that he was assassinated before he could fully realize this vision.
Right.
Do you think that unfinished work adds another layer to his legacy?
Absolutely. It's heartbreaking that he was, taken from us.
Yeah.
But that unfinished work is a powerful reminder that the fight for justice never ends.
Yeah.
It's a call to action for all of us to continue what he started.
It's a lot to live up to, but so inspiring.
Yeah.
Now, I want to shift gears a bit to talk about The controversies and the FBI surveillance that surrounded King.
Okay.
It's a dark side of his story, but it feels important to acknowledge it.
You're right. It's
Yeah.
a stark reminder of, of the risks King took and the price he paid for his activism.
Right.
The FBI, led by J. Edgar Hoover,
Wow.
saw him as a threat
Yeah.
and subjected him to constant surveillance,
Yeah.
tapping his phones,
Yeah.
bugging his hotel rooms. I mean, it's a disturbing example of government overreach.
Right.
And how those in power will try to silence dissent.
According to the Wikipedia entry, the FBI tried to justify this by
Yeah.
saying that King was associated with Stanley Levison,
Right.
who they suspected had communist ties.
Right, but that justification seems pretty weak, don't you think? I mean, using someone's political associations as an excuse to spy on them,
Yeah.
it feels like a blatant attempt to discredit King
Right.
and disrupt the civil rights movement.
And to think this was all happening in a supposedly free country.
Yeah.
And it really makes you question how far we've come.
Right.
Plus, that surveillance revealed a lot of personal stuff about King,
Right.
raising questions about privacy
Yeah.
and whether, it's ethical to use that information against someone.
It's a huge ethical dilemma.
Right.
On the one hand, national security is important.
Right.
But on the other, using someone's personal struggles to smear their reputation,
Yeah.
it's a slippery slope.
Okay, so let's move on to King's legacy and how he's been honored.
Okay.
His impact obviously extends, far beyond the United States.
Absolutely. His message of nonviolence and his commitment to justice have, resonated globally, inspiring people all over the world.
Yeah.
He's become the symbol of hope
Right.
and resistance against oppression, everywhere.
The Wikipedia entry even says he was canonized by a branch of the Orthodox Church.
That's wild.
That's wild.
It's a testament to his enduring spiritual influence.
Yeah.
His message transcended religion and culture, speaking to something universal in the human spirit. His
Yeah.
legacy is one of courage, compassion, and a deep belief in the inherent dignity of all people.
And of course, we can't forget Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Right.
It's a day to remember his life and his message, but also to reflect on how far we still have to go.
It's a powerful symbol of recognition and
Yeah.
reconciliation,
Yeah.
but it's also a challenge
Oh, yeah.
to continue the work he started.
Speaking of his work, this deep dive has really highlighted how much more there is to King's story
Yeah.
than just, the I have a dream speech.
Right.
It's like peeling back layers of an onion,
Yeah, totally.
each layer revealing something new
Mhm.
and complex.
Right. And the entry even goes into some of his lesser known views.
Yeah.
Like, did you know
Mhm.
that King rejected the idea of taking the Bible literally?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he even called some parts of it mythological in his private writings.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
That's so different from the image we usually have of him.
It is, but it shows how, how his faith was this personal journey. He wasn't afraid to question traditional interpretations and sought to find his own truth.
I'm starting to realize that King was much more radical than most people realize.
He was, and his radicalism extended beyond, issues of race.
Okay.
For instance, he was a strong advocate for Native American rights.
That's interesting. I don't think I've ever heard about that side of his work before.
Yeah.
What exactly did he do?
Well, he spoke out about the injustice faced by Native Americans, recognizing the shared experiences, of marginalized groups. It shows his broad understanding of injustice.
Right.
He saw the fight for civil rights as part of a larger fight for human dignity.
So he wasn't just focused on Black Americans, but on all oppressed groups.
Exactly. And he didn't shy away from controversial issues either.
Yeah.
Remember the Vietnam War?
Mhm.
King was one of its most outspoken critics,
Right.
seeing it as a moral and political travesty.
He wasn't afraid to speak truth to power, even when it was unpopular.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just about, opposing the war itself.
Right.
King saw the connections between war,
Yeah.
poverty, and racial inequality. He understood that these problems were all intertwined and that you couldn't solve one without addressing the others.
I see now how King was constantly expanding his vision.
Yeah.
moving beyond single issue solutions
Right.
to address the root causes of injustice.
Exactly.
So what else did he advocate for?
Well, towards the end of his life,
Yeah.
he was pushing for some pretty radical economic reforms.
Okay.
He actually argued for a guaranteed minimum income for all Americans.
Wow, that's a bold idea.
Yeah, he laid out this proposal in his book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community?
Mhm.
It was his answer to systemic poverty.
Yeah.
He saw guaranteed income as a way to ensure, basic economic security for everyone, regardless of their job or background.
It's amazing how these ideas are still being debated today.
Right.
It really shows how King was ahead of his time.
He was a true visionary,
Yeah.
and his willingness to challenge the status quo,
Yeah.
to push for truly transformative change.
Right. Is a big part of why his legacy continues to inspire people today.
This deep dive has been incredible.
Yeah.
We've learned so much from his childhood experiences to his theological journey,
Right.
his countless campaigns, and the controversy surrounding him.
It's amazing.
I feel like I have a much deeper understanding of King.
Yeah.
As a complex human being.
As a human being, yeah.
What stands out to you as we wrap up this part of the episode?
For me, it's how King consistently challenged the norms.
Yeah.
Pushing for more than just like desegregation.
Right.
He went from fighting for equal rights to tackling poverty.
Right.
And even speaking out against the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
It shows his incredible capacity for growth and his unwavering commitment to justice in all its forms.
Yeah, it's like he was constantly expanding his understanding of what true justice meant.
He refused to settle for those easy answers and kept pushing for deeper, more systemic change.
And that's what makes him so relevant today.
Right.
He challenges us to look beyond those surface level solutions and to confront the root causes of injustice in our own time.
So what does this all mean for you listening? We've only scratched the surface, but it's clear that King was much more than a dreamer.
Right.
He was a strategic thinker, a powerful orator, and a man wrestling with, complex moral and political issues.
Yeah.
He wasn't perfect, as we saw with
Right.
the plagiarism scandal and the personal revelations from the FBI surveillance. But those flaws make him all the more human.
They do. His imperfections remind us that even our heroes are just people trying to do their best in a complicated world.
Right.
It's easy to put people on a pedestal. But I think acknowledging their flaws actually makes them more relatable and inspiring.
I agree, yeah.
Yeah.
It makes their achievements feel even more meaningful because, they weren't superhuman.
Mm-hmm.
They're just incredibly dedicated and courageous individuals.
Yeah.
So after taking this deep dive, what stands out to you the most about Martin Luther King Jr.?
For me, it's his courage.
Yeah.
He faced constant opposition,
Right.
threats, and even violence, but he never backed down.
Right.
He knew the risks he was taking, but his belief in justice and the power of love just kept him going.
Yeah.
That's a powerful legacy to leave behind.
It's a legacy that challenges us to be more courageous in our own lives.
Right.
To stand up for what's right, even when it's hard.
Yeah.
So as we end this deep dive, here's something for you to ponder.
Okay.
We know King was a master strategist who adapted to the challenges of his time,
Right.
knowing everything we've discussed today. How do you think he would have approached the social and political issues we face right now?
Right.
What would his strategy be for tackling the problems of the 21st century? It's a question worth reflecting on.
It is.
His life and work offer timeless lessons about leadership, courage, and the relentless pursuit of justice.
Yeah.
Even though he's gone, his message continues to resonate, urging us to create a more just and equitable world.
Yeah.